Thank you so much for joining us for Day 2, Session 1 of the virtual summit on volunteerism and civic engagement. This is our 10th year hosting this conference, which for me to fathom is pretty incredible. And I am really so honored and so blessed to be able to work with such wonderful speakers as we saw yesterday and with Justin this morning and some of the upcoming speakers to bring some education and thoughtfulness on working with volunteer programs and AmeriCorps members to each of you. Without further ado, I will go ahead and, well, first, we are recording today's session, and the recording will be available on our website for about 4 weeks following the summit. So if you would like to review or you want to share the workshop with anyone who wasn't able to attend today, you're more than welcome to do that. And now I will introduce our wonderful host or workshop presenter today, Justin Mcbride. Justin, a native of Arizona, has been civically engaged from an early age. He was part of numerous local, state, and national leadership councils in high school and went on to serve in the United States Marine Corps. After completing active duty, Justin earned a bachelor's degree in project management and a master's in nonprofit management. He has since worked with and developed programs for Students Against Destructive Decisions, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the Boys and Girls Club, and now as the founder of and CEO of the Social Profit Initiative. Justin is focused on supporting and developing endeavors focused on people and planet. Take it away, Justin.
Well, hello. Thank you for that introduction. Whenever I hear my own introduction or an introduction of me, I'm like, who is that guy? It's kind of interesting to hear it because I try to be present and I'm like, wow, I did those things. That's pretty cool. So if you haven't ever written an introduction for yourself, write it. It's kind of cool to go back through your life in a matter of 30 seconds. So anyways, welcome to the session. Thank you for the intro. Thank you all for navigating back into the space. I know it seems like as soon as we figure it out, there's an update or a new feature. And even this morning, right as I was about to log in, I had, you have to update in order to get onto Zoom. And I was like, oh man, so I get it. And so I'm just excited to see a lot of familiar faces in the room right now and a lot of new faces as well. So welcome. Now, you heard a little bit about me, and just to kind of give you the quick rundown of how I'm going to structure this morning's experience is we will have the opportunity for questions at the end. If you have a question or a comment that pops up throughout, you're more than welcome to type it in the chat box. I'm probably not going to look at it towards the end though, until towards the end, just because I want to be fully present for your comments, questions, and for the session, and to go back and forth. If it's not like a time where I say, hey, pop this in the chat box, it'll just help disrupt my train of thought. And for anybody that knows me, that's one roller coaster we don't want to go down on a 60-minute session here this morning. So the first half of this session, I should say, is we're going to look at the big picture of what we're talking about. And then the second half, we'll kind of dive into a little bit more of what do we do with this information. So this session is part of the Arizona Summit on Volunteerism and Civic Engagement. I want to put a focus on that word summit. This isn't a convention. It's not a conference. Not that there's anything wrong with conferences or conventions, but in a summit, I view a summit as having an extra special piece to it, which is more about not necessarily just saying, look at what I'm doing, but more about saying, look at what we can do, right? Looking at where we've come from and where we can go. And specifically, this session is part of the Innovative Community Solutions track. And for myself, when I think of innovative community solutions, such as what we're going to talk about today, intentional networks of impact, I think it is so crucial to just be aware of our own mindset. And in the world of, I guess, social impact or nonprofit, whatever it happens to be, this world of social impact, our dollars, our funding are often tied to the tried and true methods, right? And it's super easy to get trapped in this evidence-based mentality. And yes, totally important to be able to know if what we're doing is working and to be able to back that up with data. It's super valuable. But the only way that we can validate a new idea in the future is to give it a shot today. I'll say that again. The only way to validate, to back up a new idea tomorrow is to give it a shot today. So I think of today's workshop, this session, as being as much of an innovative community solution as what I'm talking about. This idea of not just getting up and presenting something that has been proven 100 times to work, but actually presenting something that can look at all of those things and bring some new ideas to the table. I am very much a metaphor person, so if you'll indulge me for a moment, I think of innovative community solutions or innovative ideas almost as like food prep, right? Creating a meal. There's tons of different ways to get nourishment and create a meal. You can go to the store and pick up tons of ingredients and have a recipe, and you can build off of that recipe and make a great meal. You can order from Postmates or Grubhub or Uber Eats or your local restaurant that's going to just deliver without having one of those intermediaries taking a little bit of the cut. There's tons of different ways to do that. You can also just open up your fridge and do the lazy route that I do sometimes and just grab some stuff and throw it in your mouth and drink some water and call it done, right? There's different ways that we can create a meal. To me, innovative community solutions don't represent any one of those. To me, innovative community solutions are about looking at recipes in the past that have worked, but then recognizing what didn't work, and not just what didn't work then, because sometimes everything went off without a hitch. But if we replicate that recipe today in our own kitchen, it may not work. We may be at a different elevation. We may have a different humidity level, which will change the flour and how things rise in the oven. So adapting that recipe, but then bringing in some of the leftovers, the things that we thought, we threw in our fridge and we'll get to, and they just kind of go there to die sometimes, pull some of those out. But then there's also the things that have been marinating and they're sitting in there and we don't know what to do with. But we need to start with having ideas that we're marinating in the fridge to begin with, even if we don't know what we're doing with them. Cultivating those ideas and kind of letting them marinate until figuring out exactly where they go. So as we do all that and we bring all these ideas together, we also need to consider what it's like to call somebody else, like the Uber Eats, like the Office of Youth, Faith and Family, like Social Profit Initiative, or any of the organizations that are presenting during this workshop and saying like, hey, we got this thing going on. We hear you got this thing going on and we want to add it into our recipe. We want to build something new. And you may be saying, well, what's wrong with what we're eating for dinner? What's wrong, right? I love what I eat for dinner. I feel nourished every day. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with it, but do you want to eat the same meal every day for the rest of your life? I don't know. I think there's a lot more opportunity out there to discover new meals and new things. And if you haven't had breakfast yet this morning, I'm so sorry to be interjecting all this food into your brain right now. But that's just a metaphor that really helps me kind of break this down a little bit more. So now, innovative community solutions in this workshop specific is a digital dilemma, creating intentional networks of impact. Now, there's a few things going on with that title, right? And let's break it down. One, I think it's a cool title. I made it myself, but I love the wordplay there, right? But more than just being a fun title, what do those words mean? Because I'm a wordsmith. I can make words sound great all day, even if there's nothing behind it. What are we going to do to actually back up that clever quote and turn it into intentional action and something real? The first part of that is a digital dilemma. Some of you may be aware of a documentary that came out this past year. It's been a blur, right? I'm not sure exactly when. Sometime during when we were all at home, and it was called A Social Dilemma. It was on Netflix, and it really examined social media and social networks and what this means as far as how we interact and communicate and how information is fed to us and how we eat it, how we don't even know. It's almost like it's an IV just dripping into us and we don't even realize it sometimes. And I'm not going to rehash the entire documentary. I think it has a lot of value. And that documentary actually led to part of why intentional networks for impact is going to exist, at least in my head. If it can exist outside of my head and outside of our organization, that's up to you here today and the people that I'll talk to in the future. But I highly recommend checking that out to get an idea of our digital landscape and where that's at. Because sometimes we confuse digital networks and digital media with social media. A lot of times people will tell me, they're like, oh, you like social media stuff. And I'm like, not really. I'm more about digital media, which to me, social media is a little misleading because social media or social networks implies that there is actual a social, like a society first kind of mentality, which some of these networks started off as that, and there are many great networks that are doing that. However, that's not really the reality for what's happening within them right now. Okay, that's not a judgment. There's lots of great things that are happening in many of them, even the ones where bad things are happening. There's good things that happen too. But what do we do with all that? How do we look at the digital aspect of all of that? Because that's all we're talking about today is things that are digital, things that are like this right here, right? This phone or your tablet or your computer, some type of electronic form of communication. When we look back in history, I just put something up on the screen. So if you're not looking, you're just kind of listening, check it out. I did not make this myself, but it has not been attributed to anybody. So I can't give them credit. It's been on like 1,000 places. But this is just a breakdown of communication technologies because we think of social media as communication technology. We'll touch on that in a bit. I'll kind of challenge that premise. But look at, like, we're looking 200,000 to 100,000 BC, right? So we'll just say about 100 to 200,000 years ago. Language, right? Just language, basic language, communicating, written language. Look at, I know that timeline, it may not look like, oh, it's just a little bit of a jump. We go from 200 to 100 to 200,000 years to 30, I think, what is that, 3,500 BC. So there's a long time between language and written language. That's just written as in like what I can write on this sticky note or a tablet, or, and I don't mean like an actual like iPad or an Android tablet. I mean like a stone tablet, right? That's how you would go to school back in the day. I mean, I don't think they actually did that, but imagine carrying a backpack full of stone tablets. That'll make you appreciate your textbooks a little more. So that's just writing. Printing didn't come for another 2,000 years almost. Okay, and then when we just like look, you know, then we fast forward up until, you know, another few hundred years, and that's where we get into other forms of mass communication. So mass communication, and how I define that, is like more mass distribution of information, didn't even happen until about 1500 AD. So over the whole evolution of how we talk about, or just how we talk and we communicate, mass distribution of information is pretty new. Okay, so our species, we're just figuring this out. And when you look at this, like the right end of that graphic, you can see that all this digital form of communication is very, very new. And I don't say this as a bad thing. I just say this as an opportunity to question everything that is new, right? Question everything that's old, but question everything that's new. We have a lot more information to base on historical things, but question what's happening right now, and question how you can be a part of what's happening right now. This gets into what are intentional networks of impact. And here's like a little sneak peek at intentional networks of impact. This is a partial definition. I define an intentional network of impact, these as communities, groups, or networks of deliberate focus that benefit the welfare of people and planet. Say that again, communities, groups, networks of deliberate focus that benefit the welfare of people and planet. Again, I think the words sound great, but what do those words mean? Because some of you out there may be saying, sounds similar to some of the stuff that I have going on. Sounds like a coalition. It sounds like a community group, a community advisory board, whatever that happens to be. And I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I'm actually not even going to sit here and lie to you and say that I am inventing something completely brand new. That's actually not happening today. We're bringing in a lot of different ideas, a lot of these different solutions, and kind of updating them a little bit to be more intentional and impactful. So that's a sneak peek at an intentional network of impact definition. And I think that, and before I get into the deep end of intentional networks of impact, it's important to share where I'm coming from, where Social Profit Initiative is coming from as an organization. That way you understand what's led to all of this and kind of our idea or philosophy behind things. So you're probably, if you're looking at the screen right now, some of you may be like, huh, what's going on? Well, so you heard a little bit about me in the intro, right? You probably can take away that a good chunk of my adult life, most of it has been in the world of nonprofit, public service, social impact. Most of my adult life has been there. And I feel incredibly fortunate to have had the opportunity to exist in the world of social impact from a variety of different perspectives, all relating to civic engagement with a different lens. And not just from substance abuse prevention to youth and family programs to consulting work and helping other people develop their own programs, but just the different levels. And my trajectory hasn't been a linear path that's just kind of gone like this, right? How we think like, oh, you go from this to this to this to this. If anything, like I knocked the ladder down and I'm using it to crawl from one building to another, and being able to bounce between consulting for a national agency to create, programs that are going to be delivered to, tens of thousands of young people, while simultaneously kind of like working at the entry level type staff position, just because I want that level of interaction. It's just given me the opportunity to see things at a different perspective. And I don't say this to say, look how great I am. I've had all these different perspectives and I was super intentional about it. I wasn't intentional, 10 years ago when I was bouncing around doing these ideas. I just really enjoyed it. And there's value in that as well. But now that brings us to kind of where we are today. And look at the screen, and it might make a little bit more sense now. On the screen, you see all these dots. Imagine in your head, connect the dots, okay? Connect the dots when we're a kid, sometimes there's numbers or letters and you draw from one to the other and you connect it and it makes a picture. Another metaphor is entering your brain, just in case you're wondering. This is kind of how I think of where I'm at and where Social Profit Initiative is at as an organization and why we even founded Social Profit Initiative. There are lots of dots, and I'm going to say those dots are individual disciplines, areas of expertise, organizations, but like hyper-focused things that are happening. And there's a lot of value in those dots. And when I was younger, I think my goal was to bounce around from dot to dot and try to become an expert in as many dots as possible. And as a side effect, I learned a lot about a lot of different things, right? But then I started to realize that what I do and what Social Profit Initiative organization now does, our value is not as much being the expert in any one discipline. Our value lies in connecting those dots, all the things that are happening in between the dots. That's where our specialty lies. And for Social Profit Initiative, we are a nonprofit organization, and we are founded based on the idea of supporting organizations, social entrepreneurs, people that just want to do good in the world, in developing their ideas and their solutions to challenges, facing the world. And that's kind of where we came out of. And that's intentional networks of impact is growing off of that in a different way. The term social profit, you may or may not be familiar with. I'll go through it real quick because I made it up. I don't think there was really a lot of use of it before. So this is how we define social profit. Social profit is relating to the welfare of human beings as individuals or members of society and the planet. Okay. And this is a combination of Merriam-Webster, my good friend Google, and our own brains. But social is really about the individual and a group, the interaction of those two, And then we add in the planet because that's where we live. That's where we interact. So how can we be social creatures without a place to be social? It's kind of like having Facebook without the platform to go to, right? You have to have the place to go to. So that's what social means to us. Profit, simply any advantage, benefit, or gain. And then when we slap those two together, we get social profit, which is that which benefits the welfare of individuals, society, and the planet. The reason that we provide a slightly new term, aside from just enjoying to come up with new ideas, is there's a lot of great work happening in the nonprofit sector, in the social impact sector, in the public sector. And this summit is a great example of some of the crossover between that. But we all tend to have an idea going into things of like what that means when we say, nonprofit or for-profit. And for us, we're less concerned with how you register with the IRS as what your ideas are. Is it an idea that benefits the welfare of individual, society, and the planet? Because by opening up into this incredibly broad field, we can now bring more people into the room to have a seat at the table. We can add more tables into the dining room where we can have conversations. And that's really what social profit is all about for us. Now, let me see. Since we're on the food metaphor thing, think of, this will be our last food metaphor, I promise, for a bit. Think of a food court versus restaurants. If you have a restaurant down the street that you love and you go to it all the time, maybe you order from there regularly, you're excited, then all of a sudden a new restaurant comes up. What do? You get excited, right? You're like, oh, what's that new restaurant? I want to check it out. And maybe some of you don't, but generally speaking, we like a little bit of novelty and something new in life. And so that new restaurant gets our attention. Social profit initiative and the idea of social profit is that I look at as that shiny new banner that says grand opening, except we don't want to be a restaurant. We want to be a food court, okay? Intentional networks of impact we think of as like a food court as well, right? Where you have the space of all of these different ideas that are coming into one space where maybe, let's see who we got in the room here. I'm just going to randomly call people's names out. You don't have to talk. Like I see we have David and Kathy and Ashley. Maybe Kathy's like, man, I really want some pizza right now. And Ashley's like, no, I want a salad. I want a steak. I want this. I want that. Well, in the food court of social profit, we have all of those options around us. We have some that are like established restaurants. We have that have like their own like big, setup and, like whatever that would be in a food court. And then we also have like the little tiny like food carts that we can pull into the food court, people that are just trying things out. Or you also have these opportunities for people like Ms. Jessica Voss there, who's a good friend of mine, to walk into the food court and say like, hey, I have this really cool thing going on outside, which I'll just like throw out what she's doing. She runs a nonprofit organization, Empower Ranch. So maybe she's like, well, I have this ranch, and maybe she doesn't have a space in the food court yet, and she just wants to plop down at the table and sit around and have a conversation and say like, hey, look at what I got going on. And with no other intent, just to be like, this is what I got going on while we're eating, while we're consuming this food. And so that's what intentional networks of impact are really about. That's what social profit is about. Except this intentional network of impact concept is kind of like our idea, because half of what social profit initiative does is support others in their endeavors, no matter what their IRS tax designation is. And the other half of what we do is develop our own ideas so that we understand what it takes to develop an idea and develop an idea. And when I say that, I mean to go from here into developing it to something that's has the potential to have a great impact. And that's where we lie. And so this is one of those for us. At the end, I'll put links so you can check out some of the other stuff that we have going on. But right now, I want to focus more on this one specific thing that we're trying to do. Now, intentional networks of impact. What makes them unique? We defined that before. We talked about the first half of that, which is communities, networks of deliberate focus, impacting, the welfare of people and planet. But there's one piece that we add in that I think really separates that. And on your screen, you'll see like what the full definition is of this. And intentional networks of impact being communities, groups, networks of deliberate focus that benefit the welfare of people and planet, with the primary driving force being the synapse of ideas and solutions, right? I wish I had like a light that I could put in the corner that said like metaphor zone, entering metaphor zone, because I just love them. But if you know anything about, or not, because I'm not going to pretend to be a neuroscientist, if you're aware of neuroscience or the idea of a synapse, basically that is the junction of where things happen in the brain. Just keep it there, because this is a fun metaphor that I broke down really, really deep. And if you want to connect with me offline, and we'll have some fun with that. But it's the junction of where things happen, right? It's not necessarily the dots that we looked at before. It's in between those dots. It's how the dots communicate with one another, what happens in between the dots, which really everything happens in between the dots. Because if you look at the dots and you zoom in far enough, zoom right into any dot, you'll see that in between there's actually lots of little spaces, right? It's not one, big dot. No, there's a lot of different things happening. So each dot is a dot of a lot of dots. Think back to the movie Men in Black, where you see, at the end, the alien with the little marble, and just what that looks like. So this is what separates intentional networks of impact from other groups. And let me rephrase that. It's not what separates. It's what makes a community, a group, or a network an intentional network of impact. Because anything that you already have going on right now has the opportunity or potential to be an intentional network of impact already. So it's not necessarily starting from scratch, maybe opening up the fridge and grabbing a leftover and seeing what we can add to the mix. Now, this brings us to, so Randy or Emily, we're going to do a breakout room for about 5 minutes. And while they're preparing for that, basically what this breakout room is going to be, it's going to be really quick. If you would like to pop on video for this, I would encourage you. If not, if your hair is not done, that's okay. I mean, I didn't do my hair this morning either, just throw on a hat real quick. Or just throw on your mic, whatever it happens to be that will allow you to communicate the most effective way. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple things. We're going to start off with an elevator speech. So this first breakout room, we're going to spend 5 minutes on it, and we're going to have about 5-ish people in there, and everybody's going to have the opportunity to share their elevator speech, whatever that means. And if you're unfamiliar with this term, this idea of an elevator speech, I'm pretty sure there will be somebody else in your room or in your breakout room that will understand the concept, and maybe just let them go first and you'll hear it. But really, really quick, imagine you're in an elevator and somebody pops in and they're like, oh, hey, so-and-so, I've seen you around here. What are you all about? And you're like, oh, I am. And then you kind of give your mission, what you're working on, what you're doing, like the quick, what you can tell them in the elevator before they get off at their floor about what you got going on. If you haven't practiced this before, if you haven't done it, let somebody else go. And if you have practiced it, and even if you're somebody who's a little quieter or more shy, but you're more familiar with it and you worked it out in your brain, I want to ask you to step forward a little bit, maybe be the first one. So others who haven't seen that have the opportunity to see it. So this is going to be a 5-minute breakout, and each person will spend about 30 to 45 seconds on your elevator speech, just because we'll have about 5 people and there's like transition in between that. So about 30, 45 seconds, elevator speech, each person, 30, 45 seconds. All right, now I'm just kind of killing time because I know everybody's kind of like getting in this space and you're like, okay, I got to talk, put on my hat or whatever it is. But whenever we are ready, Randy or whoever is going to do the breakout rooms, let's go ahead and do that for 5 minutes.
Okay, we're gonna do that now. So everybody you'll get a 1-minute warning at the end when we're gonna bring you back. So I'm gonna create those now. You'll get a little pop-up on your screen. All you have to do is accept the invitation and it'll take you to your breakout room. Here we go.
All right, folks, welcome back. My screen changed just a little bit, so let me get everything back here. Let's see. All right, there we go. Welcome back. It's kind of funny because even though I've done, several of these types of sessions before, I never account for myself going in a breakout room. So, which is part of it. I get it, and it's exciting. So for all of you that feel like, dang it, Justin, you put me on the spot. I put myself on the spot too. Every time I always forget when the breakout room happens. It's not like in a regular face-to-face conference, where I can just kind of sit at the front. So I put myself through it. Thank you all for sharing as you did. I had the opportunity to share with a few folks myself. And so during that breakout session, we had everybody had the opportunity to provide their elevator speech. And elevator speeches are pretty powerful. I think they're exciting, but I think there's something lacking with an elevator speech, and not lacking because there's anything inherently, I guess, wrong with the idea of it. When you're in an elevator, that's when you give an elevator speech. But if you're not in an elevator, why are you giving an elevator speech, right? Like, why are you taking 30 seconds? We talked about for intentional networks of impact and this idea of existing within the synapse, right? Living in the synapse, in between the ideas, in between the floors. If you're somebody that doesn't mind a little bit of like close spaces, imagine like just hitting that like emergency stop button on the elevator and just stopping it. Or if that freaks you out, because as soon as I said that, like I felt my heart to race a little bit. I'm like, I don't want to get stuck in an elevator. Imagine just getting off the floor where somebody else is. And, sometimes there's a little lobby section in that elevator. When you get off the elevator, have a seat, talk to somebody. I know this is the days of COVID, so use your imagination to grow this metaphor out into your digital elevators, these spaces in between the spaces, and look at the networks that you're using. One that I've been using lately is Clubhouse. And at the end, I'll share a link to, I want to host a room at the end of today at 4 p.m. today on Clubhouse, which is kind of like a recap and connect of the day, where anybody from mini workshop or didn't even come into today's sessions that want to connect and talk, we can do that. It's about finding a space to talk in between the floors, in between the dots, right? Because that's really where the magic happens. And the more we can blur the lines between the dots, I think the more, where's our dots? Let's go back up. There we go. There we go. The more we can blur the lines in between the dots, because a lot of times we put up these lines and we think that that line is like that line, it subconsciously becomes a barrier, because we will, let's see if I can, I'm not sure if I can actually annotate on here. So we have these lines, right? And we put them up and we're like, oh, great, we're connecting the dots. But what does that do to this dot here and this dot here? It kind of separates them, right? Is this showing up on your screen, this line? We get some nods. Okay, cool. So it separates it. And then you're like, oh, but I want to connect with this person, and then that person, and then that person. And so like, no matter what you do, these lines start to separate us. So intentional networks of impact aren't necessarily about connecting with a one specific dot with one linear line. It's about existing in between those lines, building networks that span digital and physical spaces that are focused on living in between the dots. And how do we exist in between the dots? So I mentioned Clubhouse a little bit ago. And if you're not on Clubhouse, I highly encourage you to do so, to get on Clubhouse right now. It's a new audio-based social networking application, and I'll call it networking for what it is now. I listen in on their town halls every Sunday with the founders of it. They have millions of people on the platform now, and they're really developing something. I don't work with them or for them or anything. I'm paying close attention to what they're making over there. And it's audio-based only. There's no posting something that somebody comes back and likes later. There's no sharing images or anything. It's all live, in-person audio conversations. Some people are just listening, others are participating in the conversation. That's all live conversations. And as I was preparing for this session, I knew I was going to be presenting this workshop, is when I actually got access to Clubhouse. And I started to dive into what they're doing over there and how we can even incorporate that type of work into intentional networks of impact. And because I'll be honest, I've been on Clubhouse about 3 weeks, and I'd say my time on Facebook has dropped about 95%. My time on television has dropped about 99%. My podcast that I listen to has dropped about in half. And not because, one, that you could be like, man, he's really addicted to Clubhouse. I am, but intentionally so. I've been intentionally diving into this platform to see what it's about because of what it brings out in me and the work that I've done over the past year in my own personal life, connecting here and here and kind of figuring out what that looks like. And the reason I'm bringing up Clubhouse is the idea of the elevator speech is kind of going out the window on places like Clubhouse. And it's being replaced with something that I'm dubbing, and the reason I think Clubhouse is working is the slumber party speech. And I say slumber party because I'd say 75% of the most valuable conversations I've had on Clubhouse, which are primarily with complete strangers, people I've never met from all parts of the world, from all levels of government and private sectors, and people that are in college, all of them, or 75% of the valuable conversations have happened after 10 p.m. So if I want to go to bed at a reasonable time, don't get on Clubhouse. I know that, and not because there's something bad that's happening there, but because that's where the slumber party speech happens. And what do I mean when I say slumber party speech? Imagine when you're at a slumber party and you're a kid, or if you don't, maybe you just have brothers or cousins and you have a slumber party, right? And you get a little bit closer and you get quieter and you're talking from a more authentic place. And your elevator speech maybe starts off the conversation, but then, take your glasses off, you let your hair down, and you have those conversations about, well, this is what my elevator speech is, but this is why I really do it. This is why I think it's important. And this is what gets me really excited and why I'm here, right? And when we can just pause and come to that space of existing in between the dots, not necessarily trying to form a line, but just throwing yourself out there, creating networks that provide the physical and digital spaces to exist in between the dots, that's when these powerful things can really happen in these slumber party speeches. And last thing I'll say about Clubhouse for now, because otherwise we'll get out of here way too late, is some of the conversations I've had have been with people that are getting ready to present to, international summits on climate change and, looking at people that are talking about, seaweed and how that can impact climate change and social justice, and people who have been actually arrested, because of their involvement in different protests and different movements and things like that, and hearing their side of the story. And then hearing in that same conversation, somebody else coming into the room and being like, hey, I've just been listening to you all for a minute, and I didn't realize that was your experience. And the more we can listen to each other's experience, whether you're a nonprofit organization or a social entrepreneur, whatever it is that you're doing, while you're doing it, the more we have the opportunity to actually connect the dots without a linear line. And the way we connect the dots is with intentional networks of impact and having those physical and digital spaces to exist in between the dots, to not focus on the specifics of what we're doing at the dot. And here's one important thing. So if you kind of zoned out for a minute, this is one thing I really want you to focus on as another key aspect of intentional networks of impact, existing in between the dots. When I say that, I mean, set a number, be intentional, be deliberate. This is a big picture idea, but be deliberate. How can I exist in between the lines in a deliberate way? And how much time am I going to do? For me, I started looking at Clubhouse, for instance, and some of the other networks that I've been exploring, and to see how I can build off some of these other networks that are digital networks that are existing as a component of the digital networks that I'm building to complement all this. How much time am I going to spend on that app? How much time am I going to spend on the others? Where am I going to spend? Even though I may not be living on the dot, when we're not living on a dot, then we get kind of we feel like we're out in the ocean. So if you look at your screen, you see all these dots. Imagine these dots being little islands. I think the reason we stay focused on our discipline is because we look at them as an island, and off of the island, that's the open ocean. And that's scary. right? What's going to happen? I don't know. But exciting stuff happens in between the dots. Imagine the last time you went camping, in, the campfire conversation. Imagine the summit that you went to last year if you've been here before and what happened there. I guarantee you most of your valuable connections happened outside of the workshops. Not that what I have to say and other presenters have to say aren't valuable, but it's that space in between where the magic happens. So how do we do that outside of a summit? How do we do that outside of physical interactions? We have to figure that out. And that's up to us to be intentional. And for me, that means saying, for me personally, and this isn't a number you have to give yourself, my recipe now is I'm going to spend half of my time, like where half of my, we'll say like professional cognitive time, spend half of that in the synapse, in between the dots. And that may sound like a lot. Some of you are like, I got a lot of work to do. No, that's okay. I don't expect everybody to do that. But some of you may have volunteers. You may have interns who would love to spend a lot of time. Give them something to do. Tell them to go on Clubhouse, to connect with Justin. Be like, Justin's this crazy guy that wants to talk about big ideas. I don't have time to think about big ideas, but I have people here that do. So when I say half of my time, for you, that could be half of your organization's time. That could be a third of your time. Whatever that happens to be, find a time and say, how are we going to exist in between the dots? Because as you build your own network and you participate in other networks, the line starts to get blurred. And that's what intentional networks are all about, blurring the lines between all of the networks, but then having our own space to come back to. Now, really quick, I want to do another breakout room. This one is going to be, we're going to do this one for 5 minutes as well. And I know we did start a little bit late. So if you're aware, we are going to run over just a little bit, probably about 10 minutes or so, but we left room at the end for questions. So you'll be able to still get all of this and everything you need and dip out if you have something else to do before then. But this breakout room, 5 minutes. We did elevator speech last time. Now we're going to do the slumber party speech. I want you to just like, and when you enter, actually, let's do it right now. We'll do it together as one big room. Okay, so to help us, because normally at a slumber party, you've been hanging out for a bit, so it takes you a while. We're still going to go into the breakout room, but to quicken, I guess, getting into slumber party mode, kind of connect. I'm going to do a little bit of intentional breathing. I'm going to say about 20, 30 seconds. And just to kind of like center myself as I enter the breakout room. And at the end of this 20, 30 seconds of intentional breathing, we'll enter the breakout room. And everybody, same thing, about 30, 45 seconds for your slumber party speech. And for the slumber party speech, it's okay if you overlap. It's okay if you laugh. I want everybody to be unmuted for the entire time, even if you're not talking for the slumber party speech. But to help us kind of get into that zone, like let's just kind of connect. I always do this, even though I say intentional breathing, it's more like intentional body as well. All right, so I close my eyes. You don't have to keep your eyes open. Whatever you do, kind of focus on something softly in the distance. Just let the air out that you have in your body. All right, now together, let's go ahead and for about 5 seconds, we're going to take a slow, intentional breath in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and pause. Out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breath in. Breath out. This next breath, we're going to do 3 seconds in and 6 seconds out. Breath in and out. Another really exaggerated exhale on this next one. Breath in and out. Last one on our own. And when you're ready, go ahead and open up your eyes. We can go into breakout rooms when we're ready. When your eyes are open, if they've been closed, click to join that breakout room, and we'll have 5 minutes for your slumber party speech. Remember, mic's unmuted the whole time. for everyone, if you can.
That was much too short.
I know, right? Who wants to I know right now I want to take this pillow and I got a couch behind me, right? And just kind of hang out, put the phone up and just talk to some people. But that's a slumber party speech. And and there's overlap between an elevator speech and a slumber party speech. And, because I'll let you in on a secret, we're the same person, whether we're in a sleeping bag or we're in an elevator, right? Whether I'm like this talking to you right now, or like this, or whatever I have going on, same person, right? And there's nothing wrong with having different hats and different lenses, literally, but just being authentic even when you're in the elevator. I know there's going to be people that are going to say that's crazy, but try a slumber party speech in an elevator and people are like, what do you do? Just be like, and I thought about that for myself yesterday, when I was kind of preparing for this. I thought, what do I do? Because people ask me what do you do? And for a long time I kept having to frame it, because my current situation, my living situation, the nonprofit that I founded, and that we're all of this is unique. It's different than a lot of other people, and it's intentional though. It's not just laissez-faire. It's very intentional, but it's different than other people. And so I'm how do I make that, how do I explain that to other people when they ask oh, what do you do? And I thought about the other day, I don't know why I just asked myself, I was what are you doing? I was just I'm really enjoying life. I'm just enjoying what I'm doing, and I'm really passionate. And yesterday, I'll share something. There was a workshop yesterday, and something that can help you, with your mission statement. And I'll share my mission statement, because the workshop yesterday, he had us do that. I can't remember his name, but 12 o'clock workshop. He talked about our mission statement, and we got to develop that. And for me, our mission statement, and then our shadow mission statement, which if you don't know about that, I'll talk about it more actually in Clubhouse tonight. If you want to come over to that, we can share over there what yesterday's workshops were all about. We can talk, we can have some slumber party talk. But my mission is to exist with purpose, on purpose, for a purpose. And that's intertwined with the social profit ethos, which is actually in here as well. This is an e-booklet. It's very short. This one's seen a lot of love. It's just something that I wrote, which if you want a free copy of this, it's just the philosophy of social profit. I can get you a digital copy. I'll give you a link at the very end for how you can get that. If you haven't ever written a mission statement, and then take that mission statement and expand it. Because the reason this one has love and coffee stains is I wrote this, and it's for social profit initiative, but at the end of the day, it's my brain as well. It's so you, for your position, everybody in a position that's a leadership position could do something like this for yourself. And I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this now. I'll talk about how we can talk about this later at the end. But yeah, super valuable. I even have my own notes here. I'll be writing stuff and I'll be like, wait, I thought about this before. I spent hours and hours and weeks, diving into this, literally in the middle of the woods, so it kind of helped out. But knowing what's important to you. No. Do you have something, Emily?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just going to do a quick time check. We have about 8 minutes left. And then I also, you were referencing Dr. Clow, Dr. Max Clow, who did the noon session yesterday, and his recording will be available on our website in the next week or so folks can go back and review that.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll kind of get towards the wrapping it up piece of it, because I know we started later, but we don't want to hold you too late, right? Anyways, but now as we kind of get to let's move back down to where we were. All right. So really, not quickly, but appropriately timed, you might be saying, okay, this is all good. This is all big picture. And we've been talking about this, and I think it's big picture, but some of the interactions we've had, I think, are valuable to show us the importance of recognizing the elevator speech versus the slumber party speech. And as we look at intentional networks of impact, how we do it, that's going to be up to a lot of you. I'm going to be presenting at other summits and talking to people about this and talking on Clubhouse and how we develop intentional networks of impact and how we find the best practices and we do all these things. And we talk to all of you that are out there and you're like, well, hey, this is how my coalition works. This is what we have going on. And I offer up some of the digital solutions and all the things that we have. We're going to bring these ideas together. And together, we are going to develop the concept of intentional networks of impact beyond a big picture idea into super focused, meaningful things. Because how absurd would it be for me to sit here and talk about intentional networks of impact and the synapse and living in between, and then present you with here's a ABC 1, 2, 3 guide on how to do it. That's not authentic. How can we build intentional, authentic networks if we don't build them within a network, which is what most of our networks have been up until now. And I have lots of ideas that I'll bring to the table, lots of them. But I'm gonna slowly disperse some of those ideas because I want to hear what others have to say and how we can learn from all of these different components. As we look at intentional networks of impact, this is kind of how they're structured. You have 2 different types or impact that have 2 different kinds of areas of focus for an intentional network of impact. They're either idea or solution focused, which I'll share one of those in a moment that we're doing. And then the other that is community focused, which is like a specific geographical area. So like one idea could be substance abuse prevention in general, or mental health or whatever that is. And maybe you're just a part of it. Maybe it's hyper focused within your organization. And then there's the community focus, which could also be like a hybrid of that as well in your organization. Or it's just something like South Mountain Works Coalition that I've done, been part of for a little bit here and there. And it's specific to the South Mountain community. So different kinds of ways to frame an intentional network of impact. And then there's the methods of impact. Deliberately designed digital hubs and intentionally in-person physical hubs. So digital hubs, physical hubs. And not just digital and physical hubs, but something that I don't think any network has really figured out up until now. How do we combine those two into a more seemingly just like crossover, blurring the lines between the digital and the physical? How do we do that? Well, I think we do that by having the spaces to exist in between the dots, the digital hubs, the physical hubs. And there's way too much to talk about here in this session today, but we have the place where we can go talk about that we are creating, that we are building to be kind of like a network of networks, where I just made that live today. Things where I can share things like this, which is our 3-2-1 action plan, which I'll give you all links to all of this stuff later. But we have a space for that, where we can share things like this, looking at our 3 areas of focus, our methods of impact, our one purpose, where we can start to break down our own networks, where we can build the idea of intentional networks. And I'm going to commit to once a week for the next however, kind of developing a course, or we are developing a course, so to speak, of lessons of intentional networks of impact. And each and every one of you is invited to be part of that. And we are going to develop it together. One day, maybe it'll be a course that we can offer and we can bring different people from different organizations into the room. And who knows, maybe that'll eventually be a revenue stream for us and for other people. For right now, we're just developing what this looks like. So if you're somebody in this space and you want to be part of this, and you want to have like a weekly nudge to be like, okay, well, let's be part of something, join us. Because if you join us and building not just your intentional network of impact, you can join in the development, the cultivation of the idea of intentional networks of impact. Because there's no way I could ever try to explain it or do it in 90 minutes or even a whole day here. It's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take you. So this idea is something that I'm putting out there. It's not fully fleshed out, it's not developed, but I think there's a lot of value in what it can become. And a lot of people that I'm already having conversations with and building. And I think there's really something special here. And it's time that the world of social impact is taking the lead on developing a new network. And this network, it's not just about Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and maybe using some of those, but how do we develop our own digital hubs? And that's something that we did. I put this link up here. I'm actually going to share one thing with you. Here's all of our stuff. If you want to take a screenshot of that, I'm also going to give you links to share in a moment so you don't have to copy all those down. Like I'll post it in the chat box. But if you want to take a screenshot or something of that real quick, you can do it, because I'm going to pop over to another space. So we have created a couple different spaces. One is for our own thing, just like half of what we do is supporting others, half of what we do is supporting ourselves. We're building two networks. One for us, it's focused on the idea of experiencing life mindfully, living with purpose, as we say. And we've created our own network. And you can kind of see, whoops, I don't know where that went. It totally disappeared. I don't know where that went. So we'll bring it back up here in a second. But we're developing this network that is focused on, let me see here. Well, Google Chrome seems to be really mad at me. So what I'm going to do is, because we're kind of at time, is we've developed two networks. So apparently the network gods are not on our side at the moment. So what I'm going to do is post in the chat box, if I can find it. Way too many things happening at this moment. If you've never been a presenter on Zoom, lots of things happening all at the same time. It's very exciting. But here we go. So I'm going to send you. Okay, so in the chat box, go over there. I just posted, there is two link trees. One is a link tree to Social Profit Initiative for everything that we're talking about here. How can we advance this idea? We created something called Social Profit Exchange, which is not a, like, think of it, like it's not a group, but it's more like an entire Facebook platform that itself, that's closed off, that I just opened up right now. This morning, like we literally just started. So it's like pretty bare bones. I actually, right now after this, I'm gonna go post my first post on that network. And that's gonna be a hub for us building these intentional networks of impact. And every week I'm gonna be on there and I'm gonna be posting stuff. It's also gonna be a hub for all of us to connect after the workshop, after all of these sessions, and to exist. And once a week, go over there. Also on Linktree, you're gonna find a link to request one of the ebooks. And if you want to sign up to get like a weekly nudge from us as like a text to just say like, hey, this is what we got going on, you can do that as well. But if this is something that's really important to you, what I encourage you to do, if there's one link that you click on and one thing that you do right now, other than going to do the evaluation, which Emily's gonna have you do in a minute, is to go to Social Profit Exchange and join us on Social Profit Exchange. Socialprofit.exchange is the website. You can go there. You can see it, the link trees on the website. If you don't know Linktree, it's fantastic. It's a link to all the links. But go there, go to Social Profit Exchange. And there's nothing there. It's literally how to navigate. We are building this from scratch with all of you in the room. And there's other people that we're bringing to the table, but I want to bring the people to the table before we bring the chefs to the table, so to speak. To talk about what we want to build in these networks. What do these digital networks look like? What do these physical spaces look like? How do we mix them together? And how can we support you in doing that? And right now, you're going to be kind of getting to see our process of developing a curriculum or a training in real time, because that's what's going to happen over the next several weeks. So there's a couple of different learning opportunities that will be there. Totally free to sign up, free from advertisements. Go check it out. I'm going to hand things off to Emily. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me for a little bit this morning. And I really can't wait to see you all over at Social Profit Exchange. Send me a tweet, an email. I'm going to have my phone by me for the day looking at stuff. I have nothing else scheduled other than this. So if you're excited and you want to keep talking, talk to me. If you want to talk tonight at 4 p.m., find the link that I put there to Clubhouse and join that conversation as well. So thanks for letting me go over a little bit, Emily. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you over on the exchange.
Awesome. First, Justin, we had a couple of questions in the chat box about accessing Clubhouse. Can you talk about what the platform is? One of the questions was whether or not it was free, those kind of basics.
Yeah, real quick, it's totally free. It's in the beta phases right now. But if everybody's trying to figure out how to use it from an organizational standpoint. So if you are a nonprofit, get in now. You have to have an iPhone, unfortunately, and it's not because it's an elitist thing. It's just that's what they started with, and they're developing the Android platform. If you email me, I can't believe I'm gonna do this. I have like 10 links, 10 invites right now. You have to be invited to the platform because they only have so much bandwidth, and you only start off with 2. But I've earned some because of our interactions. I can invite you to that and join it. It's totally free. There's no advertisements on it. So if you email me, I will shoot you over some invites. You have to have an iPhone or an iPad, unfortunately, right now, which I know people that are going out, and if it makes sense, they're spending $50 on a really old iPhone just to get on the platform. I'm not saying you need to do that. But if it's something you're really excited about, check it out. Totally free. Email me if you need more info, or go on my link tree and find me on Twitter, Instagram, whatever. And I'll see what I can do to get as many of you on there that aren't as possible.
Great, thank you. And I believe also if you have the Android platform, you can like link, or the Apple platform, then you can link it to your contacts, and it will make suggestions of folks who may be able to invite you to participate as well.
Yes, definitely true.
I want to say a big thank you to Justin. You for sure are one of my favorite presenters to have at the summit. Really exciting information and getting all of us in on the ground floor with some of these ideas. I loved the concept of the connection and what happens between the spaces, because you're right, we don't operate in this kind of microcosm. We need to expand and see who else is out there, and maybe it's who else is working in our issue area, or who's working in those areas that connect with, because we know that we'll say substance use disorder isn't just about folks who are using substances. There also is challenges with access to healthcare, with access to food, with finding jobs, with housing and these other things. And that's really where the work happens, is pulling everybody together to have these conversations about what we're going to do and what those impacts are. So thank you so much, Justin, for bringing us in on the ground floor to start having these conversations and to connect with each other and with you. Also, some great feedback in the chat box coming through. So if you have a few minutes to review that.
Can I throw one more thing out too that I just thought of?
Yeah.
If we're not, okay, if you want to get people on, like, because I want to like inundate Clubhouse with this social impact people, like as many as possible from the early stages. So I have this idea that we can invite people, and then you get 2 invites. Use one to invite someone from your personal network, and then use one from maybe Social Profit Exchange. So if you go join Social Profit Exchange, we can set up a place where people can say like, oh, I have an invite. And through that, we can kind of create this, show the true power of intentional networks that we're building, and how we can connect all of these people who we only get 2 invites, but imagine how we can grow social impact. And we can not only use Clubhouse to shape our narrative, but we can shape the narrative of Clubhouse by interjecting social impact at a huge scale, just on our own, by sharing one of our invites, one personal, one social impact. That's an idea.